Hello, lovely friend. I am Dr. Mary Barson.
And I'm Dr. Lucy Burns.
We are doctors
and weight management and metabolic health experts.
And this is the Real Health and Weight Loss Podcast. Hello, lovely friend. Dr. Mary here. And as International Women's Day is coming up, I am joined by the fabulous woman, Dr. Lucy. How are you going, Dr. Lucy?
I am super, Dr. Mares, absolutely super. I have just returned back from a gorgeous trip to Rainbow Beach, which is one of my happy places. And I think even the name Rainbow Beach sounds happy. I mean, I just think of that Echo Beach far away in time, and I feel happy. And it's such a beautiful part of the world. We're so lucky to go there. So, no, I'm very, very good. What about you?
I'm good. I'm slightly lamenting the strange weather. So, I'm slightly jealous of you going up to Rainbow Beach where the weather is warm. That would be lovely. But I'm good. And I'm thinking about all things women as International Women's Day is coming up. It's coming up on March 8th, and this podcast will be released a couple of days before then. And there's so many things we could talk about with women's health, but I think a great topic to discuss is toxic diet culture and what the toxic diet culture does to us, what it does to women, and how, we might not even really know that we are necessarily embroiled in it, but how to bring awareness to that and how to break up with toxic diet culture.
Yes, absolutely. So I think the first thing is to think about, well, what is toxic diet culture? And I mean, we describe it at its essence, it's weight loss at any cost. So it doesn't matter what you do, as long as you lose weight, then that's a good, apparently. So you can distill it down a bit further, and there's three sort of aspects that we talk quite a lot about that I think form diet culture. So the first thing is that your worth as a human is solely determined by your weight or what you look like. So your size, the size of your body determines your worth. And as a woman, it had to be small. So the smaller you were, the thinner you were, the more diminutive you were, the more petite you were, the better you were. So that's the first aspect. And that's been slightly hijacked by the messaging that the thinner you are, the healthier you are. So there's sort of a little side issue there. The second aspect is that the only way to lose weight is to eat less food. So the only way to eat less food is to count your calories. So calorie counting, calorie restriction, meal plans, portion sizes are all bathed in that. And I think we should talk a bit about the science around that. And then the third aspect is the introduction of the ultra-processed food companies into diet land with their health products, shakes, bars, all designed to help you lose weight effortlessly with ease. And, again, we will talk further about that.
And I love how you described yourself. We have described yourself in the past as not a victim of diet culture, although you definitely were, but a survivor. And I too am a survivor of toxic diet culture. And I do internally cringe when I think about this topic, because not only am I a survivor of toxic diet culture, I was completely embroiled in this world of calorie restriction and guilt and shame and all this yuckiness. As a doctor, early on in my career, I was a perpetuator of toxic diet culture because I believed the messages around it's just calories, it's all calorie restriction, just eat less, just move more. And this advice, it was failing me. I was unable to lose weight with these messages. And of course, it was failing my beautiful patients early on in my career, but I still believed it. And we had the wrong map. We just had the wrong map, Lucy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's two things. One, we have known about this for such a long time, but two, the knowledge around our metabolic hormones is much newer. So I think whilst we knew, and I will talk about the Minnesota semi-starvation study in a minute, whilst we knew that science, the calorie restriction, calorie reduction model is flawed, we actually had nothing else for a long time. So it was like, yeah, that doesn't work. But what else? It has to. Like, it was like, again, that's that cognitive dissonance. It doesn't work, but there's no other explanation, so it must work. And so we just keep flogging the dead horse. But we now know that there are lots of things about the human body that have only been discovered literally in the last 20 years. And I'm quite sure there will be more things to still discover into the future. So again, whenever anybody comes up with this, my way or the highway, you have to do it this way, the idea is often, particularly if it's a sole aspect, a singular thing, the single thing you need to do to lose weight is this. And if you're not doing this, whatever this is, then you're wrong. If you hear that message from anybody, run as fast as you can.
Absolutely. Let's dive into calories now. And Lucy, you explained this so well, why calorie counting is not the end or be all. In fact, why it's not really anything.
Indeed. We will talk all about the Minnesota semi-starvation study. So, I mean, it's an interesting concept. And I think there's, like everything, there's a few facets, a few layers. So the first layer is the concept that you are only worthy if you're thin. So the body positivity movement is, and again, I think there are people out there who think that all body positivity does is to glorify obesity. And so they're very scathing of it. But in fact, it's really at its heart, it's an acceptance that your body, and to coin to use your beautiful phrase, Mez, your body is not an ornament. It's the vehicle that carries you around. So accepting that your body, and in fact, I'm going to link it at the end of this. I wrote a blog on this a long time ago now called Self-Love and Whippets. Probably needs to be renamed. But it really does come to the heart of accepting that we don't all need to look like Elle Macpherson or whoever is the current supermodel of the day. But certainly when I was growing up, she was the it girl. And if everyone was aspiring to be like Elle. So that's the first layer. The second layer then is the tools that we were taught to try and look like Elle, which were, first of all, low fat and calorie counting. That were it, low fat calorie counting. The message being that fat makes you fat and that calories matter. And it didn't matter what your calories were, as long as you were under your calories, then you would be fine. The weird thing is, we know that this is rubbish. And we've known this for such a long time, right back in the late 50s with a study done by Ansel Keys called the Minnesota semi-starvation study. Now, we have talked about this in the past, but just to revisit it, the concept was to try and assess the effects of semi-starvation, so not quite starvation, but essentially wartime diets or wartime food rations on how does that affect society. So what he did was got a bunch of, and they were men. So step one, only men in this study, not a female study. That he got men who were at a normal body weight and then put them on a diet that was 3,000 calories. So the pre-war, sort of whatever people ate pre-war. And then during the war, when there were rations, these men went on to a 1,500 calorie a day diet. So as a dieter, when I'm hearing 3,000 calories a day, my mind's going, oh my God, that's such a lot of food. What on earth were they eating? But that's the standard amount of food men need to run their bodies, fuel their bodies, these blokes anyway, back then. And it would have been not processed food because it was, pre-World War II, there wasn't a lot of processed food around. And then in the semi-starvation study, they went to 1,500 calories a day. Now, again, I'm thinking 1,500. That's hardly starving. Like, honestly, that's buckets of calories, because I'd done 600 days or 800 days, or certainly 1,000. If I wanted to go on a diet, I'd usually go, I'll do 1,000 calories. So the thing that they did, though, with these blokes is it was largely a carbohydrate-based diet, because that was cheap. And again, this is wartime, so they were mimicking war. And what the aim was to see the effects of this calorie reduction and to try, I'm not even sure why they wanted to get to this point, but the aim was to get to the blokes to lose a quarter of their body weight. So they started off with 1,500 calories, and yes, of course, they all lost weight, because that's what happens when you halve your calories, which is why people go, well, therefore, we need to go on a low-calorie diet, because it works. But a couple of things happened. So physiologically, if all you need to do is reduce your calories, and the logic behind it is that if you reduce your calories by 1,000 calories per day, you will lose a kilogram of body fat per week. This is where all this myth comes from, which is all done based on some maths around the number of grams in a kilo of fat versus the number of calories versus all of these things. It's completely flawed logic, because if that was the case, then everybody would lose exactly the same amount of weight over exactly the same amount of time, and people don't. And so then people are blamed, or people think they cheat or they didn't do it properly. But what we do know in these blokes is that, they started getting different results, and over time they had to continue reducing their calories, and they had to continue in order for them to meet these weight loss targets. And some of these blokes got down to eating 400 calories a day in order to meet their weight loss target. So the reason for that is that physiologically their metabolic rate slowed, and what that meant in practical terms was their heart rate slowed, the rate at which they grew their fingernails slowed, the body temperature dropped, their cell turnover slowed. So things like if they scratched themselves, wounds took longer to heal. The body was trying to conserve its expenditure because it recognized there wasn't enough coming in. So, these blokes, like, practically they started wearing jumpers in summer, and just they were cold and tired and miserable. But psychologically what happened was they become obsessed with food and started doing things like talking about food, talking about what they were going to do when the experiment was over, talking about what meals they were going to have. They started hoarding cookbooks. They would have like clubs talking about recipes and all of these things, which in my brain I'm going, oh, I did that. I did that exact thing. The idea that when the diet was over, and I would have a list of all the foods I wanted to eat, and I had this list of all the things I would reward myself with when I'd got to my goal weight, which were all food related, because I became obsessed with thinking about food. I remember dreaming. I dreamed about pavlova. I had a dream one night about my mum used to make these sausages, like a sausage in a roll with cheese, and I dreamt about that one night. It was just nuts. So we know that when you restrict calories significantly in people, this is what will happen. And yet, this is the advice that people still give. They still give it.
And people will die on this hill that weight loss is all about calorie reduction and restriction, and that's the way forward. But why does this perpetuate a toxic culture?
So again, as I mentioned, I think two things. One, no human is the same. So people do have different physiological responses to calorie reduction. So the idea being that if you're not losing the same weight as in this case, the experiment, the bloke next door, then you're cheating, which is the phrase that people use. You're cheating. You're not sticking to it. You're not doing what I told you. You are supposed to do this amount of food, and you must be eating more than that because you're not doing what the maths say should happen. So that's the first thing, which makes people feel, well, first of all, feel guilty, because what if during that whole week they had, a quarter of a sandwich? Well, that's the reason you're not losing any weight. It's because you buggered it up. It's your fault. Or the other thing is that people will go, well, you need to exercise more then because you're not moving enough. You must be just lying around like a sloth. And honestly, these blokes were so tired. They kind of did a bit, but that's your body's survival mechanism coming in. You're not lazy. It's your physiological response. And so it's toxic because we deny our body's physiological responses and use them as ways to shame and guilt people into doing things. Like, you're lazy, you're lying around, you're hungry. Oh, what a bad person you are for being hungry. How greedy are you? God, you're hungry again. You just ate your 200 calories. So there's lots of toxicity in that. And then I think the third layer to all of this, so the first layer being you're only worthy if you're thin. The second layer being the only way to lose weight is to calorie restrict. And the third player in this is processed food industry that have come up with a weight loss solution for everybody, which is in the form of, processed shakes, bars, supplements that are all, supposed to help us and don't.
Yes, and set us up for failure and failure and failure, which then leads that cycle, that vicious cycle of guilt and shame. And I also think like victimization, people who have fallen victim to the processed food industry, victim to diet culture, they're stigmatized, and it's a really, really horrible toxic culture that has developed across the globe. And it's not just a female issue. However, it really does affect women particularly badly because women are targeted by diet foods, and women have traditionally been under a lot of pressure to be beautiful, to be desirable, to conform to these particular norms. And I know this happens to men too, I do, but there is an increased intensity for the way that women experience pressure to look a certain way.
Yeah. And I think there's two things going on here. In the past, when women were, again, more traditional roles, so women were the homemakers, we weren't smart, we weren't financially independent, we, were prized on how we looked. That was it. Obviously, with the wave of feminism and equal opportunities and those sorts of things, that has changed a little bit, well, a lot. And the focus on aesthetics is still there. It's probably now spread over, you're right, to men now. And men are marketed. There's no doubt about it. I mean, the man shake is started off as a man's product, but women have been judged for such a long time solely on their appearance.
Yes. And that still happens. There is still a cognitive bias that I think it's been sort of imprinted in all of us, that we do judge people on their appearance, and we judge women just that little bit more harshly as a species. And so women are more primed to be victimized and traumatized by toxic diet culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the underlying premise is that you need to go on this diet so that you'll lose weight, so that you'll be thin, so that you'll be acceptable. Like, that's the sort of summary of it. And it's interesting because our listeners will know what is the name of our podcast. It's called Real Health and Weight Loss. And we have spent time sitting with this. And even now, from time to time, we're a bit uncomfortable about it because we firmly believe that we are the antithesis of toxic diet culture, and that there is a role for weight loss as health But that comes packaged very differently to weight loss as part of a diet.
Yep. And that we reject dieting, we reject diet culture, and instead have this health first. Health is the priority. Health is what we want for everyone. And that for some people, and for actually many people, a part of getting healthier is weight loss, and that it's going to make their lives healthier, easier, improve the way that their beautiful bodies move around in this, one precious life that we get, and that weight loss is really important for their metabolic health, but it's not the only thing that we want from people. In fact, it's quite low down on our priority. It's not that it isn't there, but it is there. And also we tell people it's okay to want to lose weight. Like, it's your body. You're allowed to do that, because there is this big backlash, I think, against toxic diet culture, which in many ways is good, but it can almost go the other way, that if you are concerned about your weight or you have a weight loss goal, then you're buying into this. You're a victim. You're buying into this toxic diet culture, and that you're not allowed to want to lose weight. And I'd argue that perhaps the pendulum has swung too far, because health and being metabolically healthy for a lot of people does include weight loss. But it's the metabolic health that is first, second, and third. It's improving your quality of life, your energy, your mental clarity, your longevity. It's enjoying your life better. And weight loss is just sort of coming along for the ride.
Yeah, absolutely. And you most certainly do not have to be thin to be worthy. And you don't have to be thin to even be healthy. Like, it's not about, the BMI is 21, therefore they're healthy. Like, their BMI could be 21 because they smoke 3 packets of cigarettes a day in order to avoid eating to maintain the BMI of 21. So therefore, it's not the sole parameter on which you can judge health. And we certainly know that, particularly in that, what's considered the overweight, early obese, and they're just numbers. They're just a scale, a number that somebody's determined. We know there are plenty of people in that bracket who are perfectly healthy. They don't need to lose weight for health. Like, they don't. So when people go, you need to lose weight to get healthy, not everybody does. But we do know that at the extreme ends of the BMI, and then again, that number is arbitrary, but there is a point in which people are more likely to have metabolic dysfunction. But we also know that there are people within normal BMI with metabolic dysfunction.
Oh, that's right. I mean, you get personal here. I'm one of those people. So I haven't weighed myself in a while, but I think when I last weighed myself, my BMI was just above 25. So I'm in that, technically in that overweight category using BMI. I'm a size 14 Australian, but I'm healthy. And I have been significantly more overweight. And now I'm this weight, post-baby, all these things are going on for me, but I'm metabolically well. I've got fantastic blood sugar and low insulin and a really healthy liver. I'm strong and I'm fit and I can get through the day and I feel good. And what I am is I am healthy on the inside. I'm an HOTI, a complete hottie. And that is what we want for everybody else. We want people to be hotties, healthy on the inside, where it counts. And I'm not immune to all of these messages. I do have that little demon on my shoulder that will tell me, because I jiggle slightly as I'm running along the beach, that, I'm less than and I'm not worthy. Those voices are there because they're deeply embedded, I think, in us culturally. But I am able to recognize them and let them stand down and just give them a little hug and say, it's okay, I don't need you right now. I'm on the beach and I'm fabulous. But that they are there. And actually, recently with a video that was on Facebook of me talking about a webinar that was coming up, and just the angle of the camera, I had my chin was just a little bit big. We got these messages on that Facebook that Facebook sort of video, people asking me what was my BMI, and inferring that I wasn't allowed to talk about weight loss because I didn't look like Elle Macpherson. And it was hurtful. I was able to, was able to, control my response to those, my internal response to those voices. But those messages were there. And that's toxic diet culture. It is pervasive.
Totally. Because there are still plenty of people. And if you know, as most of us are on these days, Facebook or Instagram, once you start looking at a site, and probably if you watch any of our sites, you'll have other people's weight loss sites come up. And the majority of people are still talking about calories. And, there will be people that will tell you it doesn't matter what you eat as long as you're in calorie deficit. And they'll compare products and they'll give you the low calorie version of a product. But I mean, it's so simple that it seems so obvious, but it's so wrong. Because here's a newsflash. When you eat, and the calories are counted basically on macronutrients. So they look at the ratio of the protein, fat, and carbohydrates, calculate the calorie of the product and the weight of the product based on that. We know that fat has a caloric value of 9 calories per gram of fat, and protein and carbohydrates are roughly 4 calories per gram. But here's the thing. When you eat whole food, you don't necessarily absorb all the calories in that product. For multiple reasons, we know this to be true. So, at its very basic level, have you ever pooped out corn? Of course you have.
Nuts. Or,
Nuts.
Pooped out anything, because poop is undigested food. A few other things are happening there, but that is largely what it is. Yes.
Yeah. So if you haven't digested it, you haven't broken it down, you haven't absorbed the calories, like it hasn't, the caloric effect of that hasn't occurred.
It could be useful to actually sort of mention what a calorie is in scientific terms, because when you actually break it down and understand what we mean by that, the whole notion of counting calories in foods does become sort of, somewhat hilarious, because it is the unit of energy that is required in certain tightly controlled scientific sort of experimental circumstances. It's the amount of energy required to heat a kilogram of water by 1 degree Celsius. But we're not a kilogram of water that needs to be heated by 1 degree Celsius.
Yeah, I know. And the contraption this experiment took place in is called a calorimeter. And we're not calorimeters. We have no calorie receptors. I'm not like a 5'9" calorimeter with blonde hair. You're not a, brunette, whatever you are, 5'7" calorimeter. We're just not. So we are dynamic hormonal beings with, fuel, and, we've got that great diagram that talks about how we access our food, how our metabolic system works, and it's complex. But yet, on these sites, on these, influencers, you will see them promoting two things that grind my gears. One is a low-calorie food option. The second one that is, I just think, such disinformation, high-protein breakfast options, for example. Try my high-protein chocolate mousse dessert. And I go, oh, and it goes, only such and such calories with 45 grams of protein. I think, oh, okay, so then when I look at it, the protein it's in it is not real food. It's not a whole food. It is a powder. So it's a processed supplement from a factory that is broken down into its finest form that's then added to this thing. It is just homemade processed food. It's all it is. Homemade, ultra-processed food pretending to be a helpful recipe.
And why is this processed diet food, whether it's homemade or whether it's, bars or shakes bought from home delivery or in the supermarket, why is this processed diet food a problem? And why does it keep people trapped?
Yeah. So our food integrity matters. So the structure of our food, the cellular structure of the plant, the meat, the egg, whatever it is that we're eating, is really important in the way we digest it. When we take that structure out and reduce the food to its simple proportions. So, if you take the whey protein out of milk, and first of all, in order to do that, you have to go to a factory. You then put it through a whole heap of processes. It's then refined and, often flavored, chemicalized, powdered, all sorts of things, and then stuck in a jar or plastic packet and shipped around the world. That has a completely different effect on our hormonal, metabolic hormones to eating the whey protein as part of a whole product. So if you eat whey protein as part of cheese, it has a completely different effect if you eat whey protein in a powdered shake or add it to these supposedly healthy breakfast dessert options. Now, again, this is not to shame anybody who uses whey protein. There's no problem. Like you do you can do it, absolutely, because you're the boss of you. But what we always want people to know is that you make decisions with the full information available to you. And processed food companies they love giving you disinformation. And I reckon the classic that most people would relate to here is Up and Go. So as a reminder, Up and Go is a Tetra Pak, so a little square pack of breakfast as a breakfast kind of meal replacement-y thing. And when you look at what's in it, it's got a whole heap of processed ingredients, including, oils, vegetable oils, canola oil, sunflower oil. It's got emulsifiers. It's got gums. It's got what we like to call chemically created fiber. And yet they used to sell this with the tagline as, the same amount of fiber as a bowl of Weet-Bix. The implication being that this product is the same as having a bowl of Weet-Bix. Now, as you know, I'm not eating a bowl of Weet-Bix because the carbs are a bit high. But in general, out of processed food products, Weet-Bix is probably the least worst.
It's the health halo that the marketers will put on these highly processed foods that traps us. If you want to break up with this toxic diet culture, to all the women and men out there, what steps can you take, lovely Lucy?
So the first thing is to recognize that simple calorie reduction, it will give you a short-term weight loss. And to pretend it doesn't, again, is folly. So we're all about giving you proper advice so you can make a decision for yourself. So you will definitely lose some kilos. But it comes at a cost, and that cost is to your metabolism. And the only way, if you're using pure calorie restriction as your tool, the only way to maintain that weight loss is to continually reduce your calories over time and time and time. So step one is to recognize that's an option, but there's a cost. So therefore you get to decide if you don't want to do that option, then you go, well, what are my other options? And your other options, in the way we like to describe it, is to learn about what food choices are helpful for you. So for us, we recognize that the majority of people who have, I say this, found themselves overweight despite years of dieting, because that's what happened to me and you. I suddenly thought, God, I'm just fatter than ever. How's this happened when I've spent my whole life trying to lose weight? No wonder you feel like a failure. But so you just find yourself in this place. And yeah, again, I developed, like most people, lots of women, particularly postmenopausal women, but insulin resistant. And so, we know that the most helpful foods for that are low carb, real food first. So real food and then lower carbohydrate versions of that. And so, you can make choices around that. The gaslighting trap that I reckon happens is the idea that you should be able to eat anything in small portions, because the food is not designed for that. It's designed to be hyperpalatable, overconsumed. It's designed to give your brain the most dopamine, and it's designed for quick, easy absorption by your body. So I didn't know this until recently, but just as a side note, Pringles are not actually, I don't eat chips or crisps or whatever people call them, but a chip, I thought a chip was just like sliced potato that was fried. But Pringle is not actually that. It's boiled potatoes that have been mushed up and then reconstituted into the shape of a Pringle so that it's got that curve so that it lies across your tongue so that you get maximum brain exploding, which is why then people want to keep eating them, which is why you don't just have one Pringle and stop, which is why they even proudly promote Pringles. Once you pop, you can't stop. So we've got that on one hand versus people going, oh, don't demonize anything. You should be able to just have everything in moderation. Don't restrict, because once you restrict, you'll want more and more. It's like, oh, where do we fall in that path? So, Mez, I think we actually navigate that pretty well. And I reckon maybe you could explain how we do that.
Yeah, it's about changing your food story. So no foods are bad. There's nothing morally wrong if you choose to eat Pringles all day, every day and wash it down with Coke and Tim Tams. That's not a moral failing. It's just that it's probably not helpful. It's not helpful to your health goals. So instead of taking the morality, the shame, the guilt, the you should, you shouldn't, can I, can't I out of it, and instead looking at what is helpful to my body. How can I nourish my body? How can I love my body? And real food is the best way to do that. And yes, if you've got, if you want to improve your metabolic health, then real food that's naturally lower in sugar and starches is going to be more helpful. And these foods are delicious and they're nourishing. And when you eat them, lots of beautiful, healthy changes cascade throughout your body, cascade throughout your entire life. So it's helpful versus unhelpful. And you can change your food story. You can even change your whole body story. Treat your body as a beautiful vehicle that you want to nourish and strengthen and nurture, rather than something you need to sort of punish and starve and flog into looking better or fitting some particular mold or ideal. Your body, it's you. It's yours. And you can love it and nourish it and heal it and move it and use it as this beautiful, miraculous vehicle to live your life. And this vehicle runs better on real food.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that is the key, is recognizing that. Noticing though, again, lovelies, you may have been victims of diet culture for a long, long time. And it's hard sometimes to let go of that and recognize that, for long-lasting weight loss, we don't want to yo-yo. Yo-yoing is exhausting, the roller coaster, the up, down, it's tedious at best and actually harmful to our health at worst. So the first step is, when we move to a real food diet, is also breaking up with the scales, because quite often what happens initially is we've been gaining, we do something and our immediate desire is to lose weight because that's what we've been conditioned. But sometimes the first step is actually to stop the gain. So you kind of start healing that metabolism, balancing those hormones. And I know when people go, heal metabolism and balance hormones, that sounds woo-woo. It's actually not. It is allowing that insulin levels to drop, allowing your leptin levels to reestablish, developing some skills around your mindset. And then what happens is that you're turning the ship around. And so that over time, as your metabolism improves, the weight loss just comes along for the ride. You don't need to chase it. It just comes with you.
Yes. With health first.
Absolutely. So, lovelies, happy International Women's Day coming up for all of you. Anybody, we see you. Hey, we know the stories. We've experienced the stories. We know the fear. We know the shame. We know the guilt. And what we want is for you to break free of those shackles. And if loving your body feels like a bridge too far, we start with acceptance and recognizing that caring for it, for our body and our minds, is paramount to our well-being, to health, and so we can thrive in this world.
Lovely. See you later, gorgeous one.
All right, gorgeous ones. See you next week. The information shared on the Real Health and Weight Loss podcast, including show notes and links, provides general information only. It is not a substitute, nor is it intended to provide individualized medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor can it be construed as such. Please consult your doctor for any medical concerns.